This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I've been trying to learn airbrushing this year, and so far I've only focused on single miniatures, but I want to take it up to the next level and try and airbrush my first army. I've been painting a lot of Terminators recently and really enjoying it, so I picked up the Deathwing army set and started planning. I can already hear someone saying, that's not an army, and you would be correct. So I'm adding in some additional Terminators, which we've got left over from previous videos that we've done, boxes and bits and bobs. I'm using the Ultra from Harder and Steenbeck for all of this video. I really love it. As I already mentioned, I've only really used it on single miniatures so far, so it's going to be interesting to see how it holds up painting armies. I don't want to make life too easy for myself, so I'm going to paint up my additional Terminators as penitent blades, and then everything from the Deathwing box will be traditional Deathwing. The narrative of the army, I want to be the blades are getting into it, quite chipped up, maybe taking a bit of a battering, and then the Deathwing comes in to back them up. So they'll be a little bit cleaner, less grime, that kind of thing. Two armies in one, but the same army-ish. I've technically done test models for these before, so I'm just going to jump right in. We're going to shoot back in time to when I had short hair as well. Starting with the penitent blades, I want these to feel like quite a unique fighting force, so I'm dusting off my GK2 and printing some bits from Great Tide Studios, just little crosses and some skulls, candles, that kind of thing. Hopefully they make them look a bit more different and decorated. Whilst they were printing, I drilled all the barrels and got to priming. I decided to prime with white first off. Then when that was dry, did an all-over coating of pink using Squid Pink from Vallejo, I think it is, the pink that's from their air range. Then going in for the pre-shade with Tamiya Flat White. I picked this up from Henry from Cut Paint. I bloody love it. I've been struggling with white inks and them reactivating a bit recently, but swapping to the Tamiya stuff, I've had no issues. I really, really rate it. Thins down really nice, and the blends are just pristine. They are solvent based though, which is one potential downside. I've used this yellow method a lot, and Purifist contrast through an airbrush, the pink turning orange and the white turning yellow. It feels like cheating. It's just awesome. It's by far my favourite way of doing it. The airbrush is holding up great so far. A bit of tip drying here and there, but I'd expected that using larger quantities of paint, you know, painting 10 miniatures at a time instead of one. I'm either stabbing the needle with a big brush as they suggest, or giving the trigger full beans to clear any blockages. My 3D bits had finished printing at this stage, so washed and cured them and started sticking them on. I did do some base toppers as well, but then I realised that I'd already glued my Terminators to the bases anyway.
Let's play hide and seek when we talk about this video sponsor, Squarespace.
Start a completely personalised website with the new guided design system Squarespace Blueprint. Choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up.
Tailored to your brand or business and optimised for every device. Easily launch your website and get discovered fast with integrated, optimised SEO tools, so you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want.
Make checkout seamless for your customers with simple but powerful payment tools. Accept credit cards, PayPal and Apple Pay, and in eligible countries offer customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay.
Get started with a professionally designed Squarespace website template with options for every use and category. Then optimise your look, update content and add features to fit your needs. Transform any template into your own and stand out online on every device.
So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/thepaintingphase for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Back to airbrushing. So back to painting by hand, painting on the move. I've quartered 5 Terminators so far, and that's taken me about 3.5 hours. So yeah, it's gonna take a while. And then it's time to shade them. When I'd done this previously, I'd opted to glaze everything with a traditional paintbrush, but I wanted to try and use the airbrush as much as possible. So this time I'm opting for trying some masking putty. This video is about airbrushing my first army. I want that airbrush look, so let's give it a go. It is really fun, it's just time consuming, and over time the putty succumbs to gravity and droops off. I found that out the hard way, having made up some, leaving them overnight and then coming back into the office in the morning to just a big gooey putty mess on the bases. I did mention it was time consuming. It's definitely a skill to match the putty up to the lines of the armor, a skill I've yet to master, I might add. I think you just really have to spend the time on it and use a scalpel to try and sort of make things as straight as possible.
So I've masked off and I've done test models for 2 Terminators using the AK paint, mixed results. I'm gonna just completely sack them off and swap to Game Air and hope for the best. More practice with them and the ratios, and they just work better through an airbrush because they're designed for it, I guess. Took me 20 minutes to do these 2. I've got, after this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 left. These took 20 minutes, so that's going to be like over an hour of masking, which is quite a long time, but it is a style I want to go for. It's tricky. Getting the lines perfectly straight. Well, I don't think I'm going to spend any more time trying to get them perfectly straight. I'll just try and cover it with weathering. And I'm breaking loads of these 3D printed bits as well. I think I'm just going to glue them back on. Potentially would have been easier to glaze, but I know that I'm not good enough to get the finish that one. Okay.
No substitute for putting the work in. I got through my masking and airbrushing. I swapped to Vallejo paints and had much better results. I do really like the 3rd gen AK acrylics. Through an airbrush, I just haven't had as much practice with it. I know a few people have said that they're a bit tricky through an airbrush, so I just like things being a bit easier. Then I got stuck into blocking out the rest of the details, giving everything a coat gloss varnish ready for a recess shade. And I'm using a diluted brown oil paint for that.
So I thought for quite a long time that I was going to streak and grime these guys, and after finishing the airbrushing of the armour and seeing them from a distance, I really liked how vibrant they were, so I wanted to kind of leave that intact without dulling it down. I've done an oil panel line and I'm really not chuffed. I think I diluted it a bit much, so it's kind of like ran out the recesses and just made the finish look really muddy. I know I can clean it up with some spirits, which is exactly what I'm going to do, but I made up too much wash anyway, and quite a lot of the spirits has evaporated, so I'm going to go in with a second coat, which will hopefully stay put because it's a bit thicker, and then get to cleaning up. But yeah, not amazingly thrilled. I knew this was the ugly stage. Like, as soon as you gloss varnish everything, it just looks awful, and then you put your wash in and mat over it. So persistence, hopefully we're okay. But yeah, any tips on oil washes, let me know.
And then with that done, I wanted to start on my Deathwing. Taking a long time, so I wanted a bit of a refresher really, and just feel like I was making some progress elsewhere. I'm pretty much following Henry's tutorial from Cut with Paint. I'll stick a link down in the description. I swapped out Thondia Brown for Charred Brown, which is one of Vallejo's air paints. The more I paint with an airbrush, the more I realise I'm a fan of the convenience of air paints. Easy to get the ratios with the dropper bottles. It just saves time. If I make an exception for anything, it better be good. And speaking of exceptions, it's on to more Tamiya paints. And they're just so good through an airbrush. I can't speak volumes to how good they are. There isn't loads of footage on this section because it kind of just happens super quick. I airbrushed the armor of all of my Deathwing, 15 models, in an hour and a half. I might just think that's quick because I spent ages doing the split scheme quickly. Things all come together. The test model that I did, I kind of realized that I covered up too much of the brown in the shadows, so I tried to use it a bit more sparingly. A few mistakes here and there, but generally pretty happy. The armor is the focal point of the army, I think, here, and just like that, it's done. So using that endorphin rush from actually kind of doing something to an okay standard and reasonably quickly, it's back to these split monstrosities. Metallics, I'm in love with Vallejo Model Air, made for an airbrush, but have a paper towel nearby to dab off some of that extra moisture. I've generally moved back to Citadel shades and contrast for shading metallics now. I like that they're a bit shiny. Anything too matte isn't really the look that I want to go for. Just kind of makes those metal colors look a bit flat and a bit weird. Reasonably easy basing scheme, Lunar Desert, wash and a dry brush, and then I covered up half the base in mud to try and show that they'd been fighting for a while. Some army painter tufts on there, bit of contrast paint for the light things on the armor, and we're done.
I'm looking at all these and they're starting to get there, which is really cool. I need to put some transfers on, matte varnish them. I want to put some, like, do something with the fists. Some on the box art have like checkers or stripes, quite like a red stripe or something like that as a bit of a highlight, maybe a green one. So play around, can use the airbrush for that. The knights, the more I look at them, the less I like the cloaks, capes, tabards, whatever. I'm going to leave them for now and might repaint them. I've reached out to some folks and asked for some feedback, so my bad on that one. I think I've tried to do it in a really sort of vibrant GW style, lots of edge highlighting and pretty bright colours, but the armour isn't like GW, so it looks a bit odd. I don't know. Final highlight colour a bit too bright, maybe. So we'll see. Might leave them. Really, I think I should repaint them, but yeah. Starting to realise there's going to be a part 2 to this video as well, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
But it's not over. Jeff's been tallying up the points, and I'm kind of in a weird no man's land at the moment, and he suggested that I need to add a few more models to try and get it towards 1,500 points. So there's a few more to add to the list. We've got Belial, who I was going to be painting anyway, a chaplain in Terminator armor, and then I had a Ballistus Dreadnought and a Brutalis Dreadnought. There's no way I'm going to get them finished in this video, so I guess there will be a part 2. But we're not over yet. What I am going to finish, however, is my Deathwing Terminators and my Knights. Repeat prescription for base coating, all the details. So I did most of that off camera. Gloss varnish, and then it's time for some shading again. I thought I'd try panel liner this time instead of oils. Similar results to the oils, really. Unsure which one I like more. It still required a bunch of cleanup, was a little bit dirty, and I had to go in with 2 layers anyway. And then when you go in with the second layer, it doesn't flow around the model quite as easily. So yeah, tips on this. Super interested to see what people prefer to use, panel liner or oil paints for recess shading, or just doing it manually with a brush. Who knows? Transfers went on fine. The old classic of Microstep, Microsol. The shields were the trickiest with those long transfers, but having that gloss varnish underneath made it doable. I say it was tricky, I still managed to get all of them on, which I'm quite happy with. Coat matte varnish again, and then that's the end of my airbrushing. I sacked off the paintbrush sleeve for a pair of reverse grip tweezers. They're awesome, permanently closed, so great for sponge chipping. I did get on better with these. I think the results are better. Then it's highlights, metallics, etc., just like last time. I'm using a wet palette, but I'm also making a note to either paint on my thumb or a hard palette to test consistency. It's super interesting, and I'm definitely finding it useful adding in that extra step. I've noticed from this the majority of mistakes I was making were either from an overloaded brush or too thinner of paint. Mistakes are time consuming to fix, so testing my paint on a miniature-like surface before I go on the miniature means I'm not going to be surprised. So I could immediately tell that some of the paint for the bolters that I was going to use was too thin, but managed to fix it and then did it in like 2 coats instead of 5. Woo! starting off the basing in a similar way with Lunar Desert. I sort of watered it down a bit more so it wasn't as crusty, and then it was just a blob of mud and a tuft instead of covering half of it there. There is a difference between wet ground and muddy ground. I realised that I kind of grabbed them without really looking, and found out the hard way that I need to pay attention more. So maybe I need to work on the basing a bit, put some wet ground on the other ones instead of muddy ground. Anyway, and we are finally done. I think it's at this stage, like Squidmar says, like grand reveal, but I'm not as good at painting and I don't have a smoke machine, so we will say adequate reveal. So that's it. That's my first army, generally almost all painted. I think my only real criticism of the Ultra from Harder and Steenbeck is the stiffness of the trigger. And it's such a minor gripe, but it's something I've noticed with painting an army as opposed to a single miniature. It is quite a stiff trigger because as a beginner, you have to put conscious effort into pulling it back into the right position. If you had a lighter trigger, it would be easier to pull it back too far, for example, and then your miniatures would end up being a bit of a mess. A lighter trigger would, however, be more comfortable to use over a longer period of time. At one or two occasions, I had a bit of a sore hand, or didums. It's barely even a complaint. I think for the vast majority of people that are watching this video, this airbrush will do you absolutely fine. If you're, say, I don't know, a commission painter or something like that, you might want to go up to the Evo, which has a lighter trigger, the exposed needle, so you can clean it off easier without having to get a brush in there. Maybe the downside of the Ultra is it's that good at teaching you the basics of airbrushing that you might feel like you outgrow it quite quickly. So this army is littered with firsts and some silly mistakes, which I'm going to point out to you because it's fun. So these are the first two faces that of Space Marines that I've actually ever painted. So the first one was a captain in the Penitent Blades, and I just kind of picked some paints that were close to me at the time and thought these will do. So he kind of looks like he's made of wood or dead, which isn't really the effect that I was going for. The face on the Terminator in the Deathwing is definitely better. I used some specific flesh paints, and I thought, why not? We'll have a go at the eyes, and could have been worse, but it's not amazing. That face is definitely better. So maybe there'll be a video on faces in the future. Definitely made some mistakes with the airbrushing as well, generally on the legs of the Deathwing Knights, I think. I don't know specifically why I seem to do that, but a bit of overspray here and there that I tried to cover up with some weathering. Anywho, that's enough waffling. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it this far, well done. Thank you to all of our patrons for your continued support and allowing us to do these awesome videos, which I've had a blast doing. So thank you very much. See you in the next one.